to the Borders and Borders hotline of the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call right here, Pittsburgh CW. Bob Pompiani with you until 11 o'clock at 412-575-2600. A lot of people want to talk, so let's get right to it, beginning with Waylon in Washington. Waylon, you're first up tonight. Go right ahead.
Hi, Bob. Always good to talk to you.
You as well.
Hey, check it out. Just your thoughts and comments. Not being negative at all, but like the integrity and the maturity of the players is just like a lot of my friends are not happy with. They don't even want to watch the games anymore. I mean, any thoughts?
Well, I mean, to me, it's always I watch games for what I see on the field, Waylon. I'm not so much interested in what people do off of it. Although, when it becomes a situation that reflects badly on a franchise or a city, I think people have to obviously take that into account. You're referring to Antonio Brown. And, there's been a lot of stuff recently that I'm kind of shaking my head at with him. Back in June, he came in and went after the media for no apparent reason. I'm not so sure. He talked about not having privacy, that the media blows everything up everywhere he goes. People find him. Well, that's not the media necessarily. That is his own Instagram account doing that. He has an image on Instagram that may go against maybe what he is. At least that's what his trainer said, who left him. So there are a lot of things going on in this incident down there. And again, I want to stress that this is a civil lawsuit, 2 of them. But if it's true, Antonio Brown is lucky that nobody got seriously hurt or died. Again, I want to stress, if it's true, I don't know. And I like to let these things, take their course before happen. But I mean, if you're throwing objects out of a 14th floor balcony, including an ottoman, first of all, that's not an easy thing to lift up and throw. I would think you'd lift it up and just toss it. But the fact is, there were people below. Whoever did this, and if it was him or maybe someone associated with him, whoever it may be, very lucky that there wasn't a serious damage there. Thanks, Waylon. Appreciate the call. Let's go out to Marilyn in Monhall. What's up, Marilyn? How are you?
Hi, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
What do you attribute all the martyrs?
Well, it's premature to call it a downfall. He's off to a slow start, but he's not the only one. There are a lot of other guys on that team who haven't played well. And as a team, Mike Sullivan kind of put them through pretty good practices this week because they're not playing the way he wants them to play, which is play smart, play good two-way hockey. Instead, they're trying to trade chances with people. And when you do that, I don't care how gifted you think you are, you're going to give other teams really good opportunities on odd man breaks. And Montreal did that and took full advantage of it the other day. As far as Olli Maatta, I still like what he did. Last year was his first season of playing the entire year uninterrupted by injury. I thought he was really good, too. He's an under-the-radar kind of guy, fundamentally normally sound. Foot speed, not all that good comparatively, but he's had a lot of stuff to deal with. But I think he's going to be fine. It's 2 games. I wouldn't draw too many conclusions. They do have depth there, and I think Mike Sullivan will play that competition card all year, and I think it serves coaches very well. Let's go to Clint in Altoona. Hey, Clint, welcome to the Sports Call. Go right ahead.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, I want to ask you a question, an opinionated question, and if there's anybody can answer it, it might be you. They say Mike Tomlin, everybody wants to run him out of town. Say he's lost control of the team with the shenanigans and a lot of the players, especially Antonio Brown and others, and and everything. I just wanted to. You hate that cliche. Well, the culture of the game has changed with these astronomical salaries since Bill Cowher coached. But do you think if Bill Cowher could be on would coach this team if he would have any control over it?
First of all, I think that's just the way it is league-wide, sports-wide. There are a lot of these drama cases, not just here. And before you say Tomlin's lost control, keep in mind in now 13 years, he's never had a team that's finished less than 500. Every time he's gotten slow starts, and that's typically been how he's been. Slow starts, but boy, they come on strong in October, November, and especially December. So I think before you make this conclusion right now, we'll see how it pans out. I thought this was a positive step for them, the last game that they played and how they responded to whatever challenges he put up for them. But, it's not just here. You see what they're dealing with in New York with Odell Beckham, who basically threw Eli Manning under the bus. And then it was asked, what about being in New York? And this is a team that just gave him $95 million. And he says, I'm not so sure. I mean, come on. But there's drama everywhere. I think the culture has changed so much in terms of players surrounded by layers of insulation, of handlers, of Instagram experts, social media, agents. I mean, it's a totally different game. Let's go to Calvin in Clearfield. What's up, Calvin? How are you?
Hi, Bob. Good evening. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. How about yourself?
I'm fine. Go ahead.
Okay, two-part question. Do you look for the Steelers to do anything different on offense and their defense at Cincinnati this coming weekend, or do you think maybe Mike Tomlin may switch some things around, or do you think they'll keep everything the same?
Well, I think I wouldn't mess with success right now. I think the key last week, we'll start on defense. Thank you for the call, too. Appreciate it. Number one, Joe Hayden was the key. Joe Hayden was assigned to Julio Jones, one of the best guys in the league, making $16 million a year. You make that kind of money, that means you're pretty special. But guess what? Joe Hayden was pretty special. And when you lock down guys in coverage, you can do other things up front, and I think that gave them the freedom. The game plan finally was to be a little bit more aggressive, but they also won one-on-one battles on the defensive line. When you do that and when you dominate both sides of that ball, normally good things happen. And I think they did that from the very beginning. Offensively, they made a statement. It got back to basics, basically. The offensive line opened up holes. James Conner ran with authority, which led to an interesting thing today. I want to bring this up on the Ben Roethlisberger show on Cook and Joe show on 93.7 The Fan. It was a quote that he offered up about James Conner. This is on Bell's return, whenever that is. We expect it to be now maybe next week, but we don't know for sure. Quote, when Le'Veon comes back, in no way, shape, or form should James Conner be put on the shelf. That's Ben Roethlisberger offering that up before we've ever heard Mike Tomlin say anything, because Tomlin won't address it until Bell is actually here. But do you agree with that if you're out there in TV land right now? Call me and let me know, or text me, tweet me, I mean. So Roethlisberger says, in no way, shape, or form should James Conner be put on the shelf. A lot of people agree with that. There are another faction of people who say, well, Le'Veon Bell is the best guy in the game, and if he's back and healthy and looks good, he should play. What do you think? 412-575-2600 is that number to call. Jason in Delmont. What's up, Jason? How are you?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Hey, not too bad. I just wanted your opinion. Wanted to know why do you think there's so much drama in football versus hockey?
I don't know. All I know is that you see it most of the time in football, and I don't know. I mean, quite frankly, less of it would be better. I don't think teams like distractions. If you're referring to Antonio Brown, it goes well beyond what we've seen here this year. I mean, we're talking about the Facebook Live video, things that really should not be happening. You put your coach in harm's way by doing that when he's addressing the team in the postgame locker room. As far as Le'Veon Bell, a lot of people want to know about distraction. He's at least going through this from a formality point of view. This is an option that he can exercise as part of the Players Association. The owners can offer franchise tags. You can sign them. You can also hold out, and you get a year of service if you come in before Week 10. It really hasn't happened that much before, but he's exercising that option that's available to him. So I judge everything there differently, but it still is a distraction. And quite frankly, there are more of them that you'd like to have than you would rather have. And there are things that are detrimental to the team, I think, in the long run on a lot of different levels. And sometimes you get just tired of hearing the same old kind of stuff. 412-575-2600, that's the number. We're going to take a break, come back with more right here live on Pittsburgh CW.